Noma Mguni, and basically I'm working with SCISpace today to talk to you about employability after your PhD or your master's or undergrad. So as I was saying to you, it is important if you're, oh, no, you couldn't hear me, so I have to go backwards. So Ph.D. Hard Talk is a YouTube channel. I interview scientists globally about their research. And in terms of my passion, it is to disseminate our work essentially to everybody globally, and also to educate the communities in which we conduct our research in. So if you'd like to subscribe, feel free to subscribe, like, comment, and turn on your notifications. Thank you, Lungani, for the message. Yahidi, I can see the message. So in terms of your skills then, you need to start thinking about, what did I learn when I was working on a project? Let's say if you were doing a presentation during your master's or your MBA, or if you're working with your supervisor to publish. It is really good to shadow somebody who's an expert. They might not be an expert in that subject field, but they have the skills, the necessary skills and the work experience to back them up. So I always say shadow. So if, for example, today we're having technical issues, I'm not an IT person, so maybe it is good that I should have, hindsight is a beautiful thing. I should have sat down and played around with this and done a trial run, right? I assumed that things would go well. So this is learnings for me. So this is now a case study. So I can reflect and think about what I can do better for next time. So what I mean by that is, on your CV, you can write these things to say, as part of the project, this is what I did. I went on YouTube, we didn't do a trial run, so therefore it caused issues on the day in question. To rectify the matter, this is what I did. So employers are usually interested in what you've done, right? And also they are interested in knowing whether you can work with a team, because a lot of people struggle to work with other people essentially, and this causes a lot of issues in the workplace, because if you're not a team player, most projects really they need a team in order for them to be accomplished. But you also have to work for yourself essentially in terms of your career plan. Where do I want to be now? Where do I see myself in the near future essentially? So if you're working on a project, make sure you're the one who's scribing and then stating who's going to look after what. So that allows you to listen to the room and to see how other people communicate and how they phrase their questions. And if they're not happy about something in terms of the project, how they phrase that so that people are still comfortable if they're senior, for example. So then you know when you get to that position, essentially, this is how I should speak. And it's not everything that you take on board. Sometimes you might just take bits and bobs, essentially, that you think would work in the near future. Try and lead in meetings as well, because it is good to sit down and say, this is what we're going to discuss today. This is how I want it to be. Because again, most companies, they're looking for leaders and they are global companies. So if you're working on a project, let's say in China, you will liaise with somebody, let's say in Mexico. So if you can't communicate properly or you speak really fast as I do, it may be difficult for somebody who let's say English is their second language or their third language. So shadowing allows you to pick up on these social cues, which is soft skills essentially. And minute taking as well is a really, really good skill, because you're able to capture your colleagues' strategies in terms of resolving any issues essentially. And that prepares you when you go for your interview and they ask, you can use that example to say, actually, somebody suggested it, and this is what I added on top of that suggestion. So then they think, okay, you're a proactive thinker. So if we have a problem, you'll be able to assist in terms of fixing that problem, essentially. So speak, don't be scared, right? If someone says the same point that you've said, essentially, Ensure that you repeat it until the room observes and realizes that you're the person who said it. And I always say, when I started working, I spoke really softly. I think I still do. And that caused a lot of problems because other people would pick up on what I've said because they're set closely to me. They would say it, and the whole room would clap their hands, and then I wouldn't get the recognition because I wanted the recognition too. So when it came to the conversations behind closed doors, they would say, oh, Noma is not confident. Noma can't convey herself properly. And as a woman, it is important, and I'm speaking to the women, that you find your voice in the boardroom. And some of these skills that I mentioned to you to say not taken, that will help you with that because you hear how people speak in terms of your male colleagues. So then you're able to articulate yourself, let's say if you work in a masculine environment, in a similar way. So that's the shadowing that I was saying to you. And write FAQs. It is good to write FAQs again, going back to what I've been saying with the shadowing, because if you can write question and answer, then that helps you to train your mind in terms of being proactive and dealing with challenges really, really quickly. And if you've used other databases, when you go in the workplace, you realize that the age groups differ. So you've got something that they don't have, and that might just be the key that you need to move you on to the next step in terms of your career. And also now we have AI. So we are so used to using AI. Probably I could have used AI today to deliver this chat. Would have had less IT challenges than we've had today. But that is essential, and that is a skill. Some people are still saying, no, we don't need AI, we don't want AI in the workplace, but that's where we're moving to, and a lot of jobs will be redundant. So if you're thinking about your career right now, you need to be thinking, okay, where am I going to go? Do I want to be an architect? Will they use AI in the near future? Will they need less architects than what the demand is at the moment? Or do I want to be an engineer? Will they need less engineers in the near future? Those are the questions that you need to be asking yourself as you're working on this project, because it is important for you to be honest with thyself and also understand the job market. So what I always say is, you can go online, you can search and say, let's say I want to be an IT person. How many vacancies are there? And then look at the graduates that are graduating in that area. So, for example, in Leicester, there's 2 universities and a few colleges there. So I'm competing with 2 universities and a few colleges. So will I be able to get my foot into the door? Will I be able to convince the room that I am the right person as a graduate employee? Or do I need to add more in terms of my skill set? So when you start thinking about these things, it is really good going back to, writing down what you've learned, shadowing, because you start to think in a way that challenges, just going to uni and saying, oh, I've got a certificate, because most people have certificates now. It's no longer something that is such a wow, but employers, if you look online, they need somebody with work experience. And by you writing and learning these skills, you'll be able to convince the employer to say, I did, because they always look at what you've done and how you've reacted in that situation. Because the business environment, as you all know, is quite volatile. So if you don't have the necessary equipment, unfortunately, your business will be closing down and you'll be making a lot of employees redundant. And this has been seen in the UK. We've had a lot of high street businesses that didn't take on to the internet wave, and they stayed, on the high streets. They didn't have any online shops, and they've had to shut down essentially. And a lot of people have been made redundant because of this, or factories, or they've had challenges as well, whereby a lot of employees through history, you didn't need a lot of qualifications, but now companies are saying we need English, we need maths, we need to know that you can weigh whatever you're doing. You can read the signs in the factory. So the world is moving forward. So it is very, very essential that you pick up all the skills that you're learning and you make sure that you articulate yourself very well during your interview, and also you write these skills clearly in your CV. So what I suggest is, I don't know if most of you have finished or you're still on your journey, is that you have a weekly review with the man in the mirror. So you look at yourself, you have a conversation. What did I learn this week? And you go through what you've learned. So for example, today I've learned that it is good to pilot test and to just jump online and think things will work, right? And I'm being honest, that's my learnings of the day. I'm being concise. What can I do better? So next time, if there is a next time, I will make sure that we have a trial run. We can share the slides, see, how it works, if we need somebody external to be doing that, or I need to be doing that. And then that's learnings, right? You write that down. These are examples. They will ask you, they'll be like, oh, think of a time when you had a big challenge, and you'll be able to use that example because you've written it down. It's in your brain. Your PA's got it in there. You'll be able to say, this was the challenge. This is how I fixed it. This is how I'm going forward. I know it sounds a bit repetitive, but it is important that you master this skill, because employers want to know that you don't panic and go through depression and you can't function. They want to know that you're proactive if there's an issue in the workplace, essentially. Be quick to observe others in the team as well. Ask how they accomplish their tasks. Even if you know the process, it is better to ask because they might know something that you don't know. So you can then improve on the process, essentially. And also listen to understand and not react. Usually we're so quick to react to certain statements or comments that people make, that we don't actually understand what the person's trying to convey. And this can be a challenge, and people say you're difficult to work with, especially if you're continuing on with your career. Let's say you're now a team leader, or you're a manager or a senior manager. They'll say, oh, you can't go to that person because they just react to everything. They don't hear what you're saying. Even if you're doing problem solution, they just react to the problem. So you never get to the point whereby you can explain what you think the solution is and how you can solve the problem, essentially. So the slides will be shared via email today or tomorrow. So you will get them, Curtis Coleman. And in terms of CV writing, it is important, like I've said, from the previous slides that I'm going through, I know you can't see them, to make sure that you mention the skills that you've learned. So, for example, you may have learned how to write a journal because you've published. Let's say if you're staying in academia, that is very important for you to get your next job. Or if you're going to industry, it is important for you to have that, because let's say if you're working, we'll say, as a new product developer, right? And you've worked on, let's say, we'll say soap. You've come up with a soap that deals with dry skin. Don't know if I have dry skin, but with dry skin, and you explained that I was able to find a lab. This was part of my project. I know how to build a lab. Just making this up as an example. Make sure you put that in there, because there are certain startups who are looking for people with certain skills, and that skill to build a lab is a niche skill. It's not a lot of people that have that experience. So definitely you'll be on for good money in terms of the best cheddar out there, essentially. So don't leave out such information, because it is critical, especially in the current job market, that you express the key skills that most people don't have. So you can go on LinkedIn and look at other people's experience, the way it's listed, and you'll be able to see that, you know, actually when people are on the entry level, this is what their CV looks like. When they're more senior, it looks a bit different. So why don't I shadow and imitate and copy what the senior people are doing? Because then you're setting yourself apart. And then also, if you have the point evidence explained, which was, this is what I did, this is, you know, the solution, this is where we went, or it didn't work, or it did work, essentially, it makes it better, and you're then set apart from your other colleagues, essentially. And also, you need to decide in terms of how you want your CV to read. I mean, nowadays you can go on Indeed, and you know, it will generate a CV for you. So many platforms, literally. But you need to think about you as a brand. What am I conveying to a potential employer, right? What do they see when they read my CV? Am I any different from my competitors? And all of us here are all competitors in different fields. So, you know, you have to invest in your CV because it makes you better in the eyes of the employer, and they want to pick you. But there's also something that I'll share later on that links into CVs, which is the next slide. So when you get the slides, you'll be able to see that information. It is good for you to look at the salary. We have inside M25 and outside M25 in terms of rates in the UK. So depending on where you live, the salary is good because it's really expensive where you live, or it's less than if it's less expensive. Let's say if you come from the north, for example. And if you're about your money and your bag, as they call it, it is really good for you to research and start looking at the salary breakdown. Let's say if you want to be a professor, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a pilot, look at what the businesses or the brands are willing to pay, because that's the reality. And usually with salary increment within a business, it will be 10 to 15%. You might get a bonus, you might not qualify for a bonus. So it is really important for you to be honest with yourself, because if you go out and you go for a job, let's say for £20,000 a year, and you're into spending, then that won't sustain you. You'll always be in minus. But if you look for a job again at 30,000, and you know that I'll have a bit of money left over, essentially just to balance my books, then that is the strategy that you employ. So it is good to work on your CV, but also to see what the market is willing to pay. And some employers, they will offer you a job. Let's say you will see it online, they will say £40,000 for the year, and they'll offer you the job, and they'll say, no, because of your experience, we're going to reduce it to 30,000. Now you have the authority to say no, thank you, or you have the authority to say yes because maybe you're desperate and this is the only job offer that you have. Then you have to think strategically. Okay, if I take this job, am I going to stay there for 6 months just to gain the experience and go elsewhere? Or am I going to go in and work extremely hard and try and convince them to pay me the money that I think I'm worth? Because some employers are really, really cheeky, and they'll just say, no, you don't have the relevant experience. But we all know if you are proactive, you can learn anything, and everything's white paper based now. So essentially you can go online, learn, and then try and put it into practice. There might be a few errors here and there, but you know, you can put it into practice, right? Essentially. And the final point is work on yourself in the sense of have a SWOT analysis. So look at your strengths, just write 3 bullet points. What are my strengths? So I think I'm a good talker. You might disagree. So share your points of view. If you think I'm not a good talker, that's okay. I can work on it. I think I'm a good listener. So you can put that there. And I think I'm very strategic, right? Those are my strengths. My weaknesses, I think I take people seriously. I think that's a weakness of mine, so I'll put that there, and I'll work through that. And then that will be your guide. So once you know how to profile yourself, when you're set with your colleagues in the workplace, you'll be able to know who's going to annoy you, who's going to, strengthen you, and who's going to be a threat towards you. And when you walk in, when you're still new in your career, which links into my research, you're very trusted. And unfortunately, sometimes the workplace isn't as trusted. And I mean the community in the workplace, essentially, because they're all competing with you. So if you're all on the same level, it's not going to be love lenses, essentially. So it is really good for you to work on your SWOT analysis of yourself, essentially. And in terms of the next thing is, while you're working on yourself, which is the SWOT analysis, and you know what your weaknesses are, you're trying to turn them into strengths, even though they're weaknesses, get somebody to mentor you. So don't look for somebody in your field. Go to somebody who's outside of your field, because you want to learn the soft skills and you want to learn strategy, because you can't be a leader without the necessary equipment in terms of strategy, right? So go external and then find somebody in your field who will coach you in terms of, what do you need for you to move on to the next level? What do you need for you to move on to the next level, essentially, the different levels. So you need that. And start mapping out your career pathways. Like I said, you need a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, because life is just life, and life is so unpredictable. You might be a young family, so your finances are a bit tied up, so you can't take risks. You might be trying to relocate to a different country. So there's so much when it comes to life, or an illness in the family. So it's always good to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. And that will help you, because then you won't feel depressed if you don't achieve what you think you should achieve at that point, because you have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. So you can move on to that strategy instead. So it looks after your mental health, essentially, and you'll be always reflecting back to your SWOT analysis. So I advise that you do your SWOT analysis every year, because we always change. We're always maturing and learning new things. So what was a weakness today is a strength tomorrow. What was a strength today, dependent on the environment, it could be actually a weakness. So if you're in a bad environment, or if it's circumstantial, that means that people expected something and then they got you and they're not happy, or they were forced to hire somebody, let's say in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're not really happy about it. So they might make your life a misery, and that becomes circumstantial. That's what I meant in terms of that example there. So that's why I say it's important to have a plan A, plan B, plan C. And the other thing is, going back to the CVs and the skills that you've learned throughout your master's, PhD, DBA, etc. When you write them, just think, nowadays, most businesses use recruitment softwares. So they pick up on keywords. So hence why it is good to have, a mentor, someone who will tell you what skills you need for you to move on to the next level. So then you can write it in a way that the software can pick it up and say, this person is a green, they have that experience. So they work on a red, amber, green system, which is like the traffic lights. Some of them use different signs, essentially, to say yes or no. For example, they don't have an amber system, but once they pick it up, they'll be able to say, okay, green, definitely interview. Amber, maybe we don't know if we should interview you or not. So if the greens are really bad, they'll move on to the amber, or then they'll go to an external agency to bring in a worker on a fixed term contract, for example, because they're struggling to recruit. But obviously with Indeed, I think it's the same system actually. Indeed is quite similar, but a lot of businesses have invested in AI technology just so that it helps them to pick the right candidates, essentially without bias, unconscious bias. Also, look at the Glassdoor reviews. Some organizations, they have a lot of bad reviews. So you can then decide to say, I'm going to go in for 6 months just to swim with the sharks, and I'm coming out, I'll go elsewhere. Or you might decide, actually, I don't want to work there. It's not for me, I'd rather go elsewhere. So it is important to read the Glassdoor reviews or Indeed reviews or wherever you want to check. But the other thing is, a lot of disgruntled employees, they write mean reviews, horrible things. You have to take it with a pinch of salt. But if 98% of the reviews are saying it's a toxic environment, I would take that as actually, I think that's accurate and correct. But if 50%, then I have a choice in terms of how to negotiate and, work through that environment and see what's going on, and see if I can survive. But like I said, it's very circumstantial sometimes. It's whether people like you or people don't like you. Some people are good at playing politics, some people are not. And I don't think I'm capable of playing politics, because I take people's word as gospel. So I run with it, which is a weakness of mine, essentially, because some people just lie naturally. They enjoy lying. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're good at it and it's looked after you very well. Why not? That's your thing. And in terms of the interviews, then, make sure you practice in the mirror, you know, how you're going to answer the questions. And I go back to the point, evidence explain. Say, this is the issue, this is the solution that I offered, whether it worked or it didn't work. Look at your facial expressions, because people buy into the person. This is where acting comes in handy. I always say at interview, have a glass of water. This is not water, but it's coffee. Have a glass of water so that you look like you're thinking when they ask you a question, even if you know the answer. It's all about the art of anticipation. So you take a drink and then you start speaking. And it's all about theatre, because they have to buy into you. They have to say you're sensible, you're logical. I'm not that logical at times, but I am logical at times, if that makes sense. It depends on whether I am emotional about the situation. And if I am, then sometimes I'm not as logical because I react to the situation. Again, that's my weakness. I know it. How would I phrase that at an interview? I would say it's circumstantial in terms of my reaction. And that, again, to somebody who knows, they will know, okay, she's saying that. But sometimes they might not. Assumption, it's the art of play. You let people think what they want to think, but you use the right words to drive them to where you want them to go. In terms of theatre, you can film yourself or ask your friends to share feedback. Again, take it with a pinch of salt, because some people, they're not really your friend. You think they're your friend, but they're not. Some people, they are really good friends. They will give you good feedback. I'm not saying be skeptical. I think it's because I've worked in HR for such a long time that I take everything with a pinch of salt. I don't take it as gospel, because I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and I've read a lot in my line of work. And in terms of the interview the person that's interviewing you, because essentially you're going to be working with that person for up to 6 months. And if they are very controlling, they will make your life a misery. And if they feel like you have the necessary skills, they will beat you down and you will lose your confidence. You'll start to self-undermine and you'll feel like you're not really worthy to be in that position. So therefore, it's not a good place to be in. So it is important that you actually interview the person that's sat across from you. If it's a 2-stage interview, make sure you interview them back. Ask the questions. Don't just check to see if they're likable, if they are reasonable. Because if they're not likable and they're not reasonable, they will make your life a misery. And no one wants that in the workplace because we spend so much time in the workplace more than we do at home, essentially. Ask for feedback again from the interview. Remember, they're checking as well to say, will you fit into the team? Maybe they've got difficult people and you come across as being soft, and they'll be like, no, I don't think they'll be able to swim with the sharks. So let's just say they didn't have the necessary skills. It's not that you don't have the necessary skills, it's just an excuse because it's legal. If you was to send them to tribunal, they'll be able to back it up and say you didn't have this, that. Again, it's all games. You have to know how to play the game, essentially. And if you want to send an email back to say thank you so much for your time, you may do so. It's not necessary, but you can do that. Some people appreciate it, the fact that you said thank you so much for their time. You can actually reject an offer. I don't know if I've said this already. If you're offered a job and you think, actually, my spirit didn't take to my potential new line manager, you can reject that job offer. Or if you're really desperate, you can take it. But 9 out of 10, you'll realize, actually, maybe I should have been patient and waited and taken a role that's below that. And stayed in that organization instead of going to this position, and I'm regretting it every day when I go in the workplace. So in terms of the workplace, I think I've been touching on a few challenges in terms of work politics. The workplace is like a maze. Some people, they enjoy drama, so they will just cause conflict day in and day out because it entertains them. They manipulate people. Don't take it personal. That's their personality. That's who they are. And we will respect that, right? And then in terms of seniors, they will have their own work politics. Don't get involved. Don't side with anybody. Just maneuver around. If they're playing football, you play football. If they're playing rugby, you play rugby. Don't say, I don't believe in that, because you'll be the first person to go. It's just how it goes, essentially. All your life will be in misery and you will hate it. So some people have said to me, oh, I want to leave academia because there's a lot of red tape. Well, I'll tell you this, there's red tape everywhere. If you move to industry, there's red tape, So you just have to bite the bullet in the sense of just play whatever game that, is being played in that industry, and you will survive long term. You can challenge. I'm not saying you can't be a whistleblower. Let's say if there's sexual harassment or if people are being bullied, you may be a whistleblower, because obviously that's really important. We don't want any of that in the workplace. Or if people are being trafficked, we don't want that. You can be a whistleblower. But again, it's always good to look at the big picture in terms of what your actions will do, the consequences behind that, and the actual reality of you moving on to a different business. Because some people might just say, do you know what, they done that in that organization, so why should we bring them on? Because we know we've got our own challenges in the workplace, we're still working on them. So it could be a blocker. So that's why I'm like, it is always good to be vigilant and to analyze and assess the situation and look at the consequences in terms of what may come out of that, essentially. And when you do get your job, do read your contract, look at what's in there, because you might assume that you've got a month's notice and it might just be a week. So it's always good to know what's in there. Look at the policies in terms of probation, disciplinary, grievance, whistleblowing. As I've mentioned previously, it is very, very important that you know what's in there in terms of your probation, because your probation is a time for you to get to know your line manager, as I've echoed previously. And it's also the time for the organization to get to know you as a person. And a lot of people are dismissed, unfortunately or fortunately, during their probation. So again, it goes back to the games that people play. If they're playing football, you play football. If they're playing netball, you play netball. But if there's an issue, you may whistleblow if you think it's relating to safeguarding. Let's say if you're a nurse, for example, or a doctor, you may whistleblow if the intentions or their behaviors are putting people's lives at risk. So in terms of benefits, again, have a look. Like I said, some employers are really cheeky. They'll say 40,000, £6,000 car allowance. You get a mobile phone, you can get a Mac, you can get this. Then they say, oh, actually, based on your experience, you get a Dell. Your salary is now £15,000 and this is this, right? Or it could be 15,000 rands. I think I've seen somebody from South Africa, or yen, whatever it is, right, in terms of currency. And they will remove all the benefits and you would just be left with the salary. Please say no, because that is abuse of power. If they've advertised it that way and they look at you and they just think, no, because sometimes you are nervous at interview. You're really nervous and you don't come across maybe as a confident speaker, or you forget to share, the point, evidence, explain, as I explained previously, to say, think of, problem, solution. How did you deal with that? How did you, motivate the team or keep everybody calm during that situation? It is good that you express those things because, again, it links into your salary, your benefits, and you as a person in terms of leadership. And gender bias falls into this again. Like I said, I'm a woman. I've had to learn to find my voice essentially in the boardroom or, in the office, because people are cheeky. And with diversity, equity, and inclusion, again, I don't like it because I feel like I'm put into a box, and people think, oh, there is that Black African lady, yeah, I don't like it. And people have, jokes, or they will say something and you're thinking, I've never been there, I've never seen it. How does that relate to me? Just because they know that you've ticked, that box. So be aware of those things. They do happen. Some people like to go to tribunals so that they can win money, but do you want to be known as the person who's always suing, or do you want to educate people and say, unconscious bias, this is how it works, work with the diversity and inclusion team? But again, my opinion is that it puts us in a box once we start going through gender and skin tone in terms of being brown or black. Some people like to be called black, some people like to be called brown, essentially. And this applies to gender as well. I had a colleague who said to me, Norma, I am a black man and I feel like I'm less than my Caucasian counterparts. And I said, how do you say that? But, I think you're a man, you have the same opportunities as all men. He goes, no, I'm less than, my Caucasian counterparts. That was his personal opinion. There's no, I haven't done any research to say this is true or this isn't, but, it's always good to have that awareness, to know the environments that we're going in and the competition, because if everybody is going to play golf after work and that's where they discuss strategy, and I'm at home cooking for my husband and kids, I'm literally missing out on the opportunity. Next day, we get into the office, they are, saying it's done already, sorted, and I'll feel left out. And then again, that will make me feel a bit crappy. And then, you start to feel, unfavored, you start to make mistakes because you feel like people don't like you, or you start to feel like maybe if I was a man, which is, a different way of thinking again. So it's always good to look after our mental health and work on our SWOT analysis and understand the industries that we're going in, and be willing to learn new skills, or be willing to say, let's be accommodative. Why don't we do this once a month instead of just playing golf? Why don't we go hiking? If you enjoy hiking, I think everyone likes hiking. Or why don't we go, food tasting? I love food, so that's my thing. But, just be proactive, think of solutions. Don't be so quick to raise a grievance. Try and find a solution, going back to the point in terms of problem solution. Bullying and harassment, it does happen in the workplace, and it is a thing. Again, try and resolve the situation through mediation if the organization does offer. Don't resolve to going off on stress, and then HR and your line manager has to bring you back into work, because again, that causes problems. When you're off, who's doing your job? The team is going to be stressed. They're not going to like you when you come back. there will always be a bit of resentment. And if they bring in somebody to cover that period, again, it might be a case that you lose out on the potential promotion because you've been out for a while. And you know, with organizations, they're always bringing in new softwares and then you have to be retrained. That's an added cost. So to them, you look like an expensive employee. So there's a book that I like, and it's called Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. I would implore you to read this book because it looks at employees or business owners in the sense of how they react to problems. And there are 4 mice. 2, they're always looking for solutions. And 2 are content. So if they find a bit of cheese, they sit down and that's that. They're living their best life. So which mice are you? In the book. And I've been reading this book, I think, since my 20s, not to reveal my age. And every time I read it, I have a different perspective on life in terms of the workplace. And it does help me because I'm able to see who my colleagues are, that I'm able to be strategic to essentially survive the workplace myself. Because it is a maze, like I said to you, and some people are not nice. Some people are bullies naturally. Some people just love to manipulate people and cause confusion. And some people are naive, but don't walk into the workplace thinking everybody is the same. They're all there to do the same thing, because if they can destroy you, they will. If they can help you, some people are there to help. They will help you to move on to the next level because they were helped by somebody else. So there's a bit of everything, essentially. It's like, I think Skittles, yeah, different colors, essentially, for everybody. And the next point is, teamwork. I think I've touched on this. Make sure you try and work as a team, even if you don't like the people. Work with them very, very well. It is an important skill to have, because if you were to start your own business, you will have to work with your employees, whether you like them or you don't. Because unfortunately, in the UK, you can't sack somebody like today. They come in and you go, no, you're done. Thank you very much. You have to give them notice because it's in their contracts. I don't know how it works in other countries. I know in Europe it's quite similar. I think in the US you can come in, your box is ready, and you have to go. So, so try and learn to work, in teams. Communicate effectively. Listen to people. If people undermine you, don't react, because you're feeding into, their pride, and they will enjoy it and they will make your life a misery. Don't let people read you easily. Take your time with it. Be strategic. Navigate through, as explained earlier. And in terms of SCISpace, just to round off, so with SCISpace, I have been using it to help me with my papers in terms of manuscripts, writing for publication. And with SCISpace, I am able to use their AI solutions. So I don't have to work that hard, which I love so much, because AI just helps me to compile all the literature together. And then I'm able to read it and assess and add on critical discussions where I think necessary. I'm not saying this is a cheat sheet. You still have to use a bit of your skills that you've learned in terms of your PhD or your master's. So SCISpace is the place to be. And also the good thing is you may ask questions. So the AI system will be able to answer. And if, for example, let's say you're looking at gender and you feel like these papers, they're not really cited as much. They are not good for me to go to a really excellent journal. You are able to communicate with the PDFs in order for you to be able to get the correct data that you think you need, which is something that I think is unique. I mean, there are other competitors out there, but SCISpace has been my baby and it's worked really well for me throughout my PhD, and also with the papers that I'm working on. And in terms of SCISpace as well, you can save your information on there. So if you wanted to add on your PDFs, you can add them on and you can communicate with your PDFs, and you can snip certain sections to build a different document. So let's say if you wrote a paper for conference and you wanted to merge it with another paper, you can do that and build something totally different for the next conference, if it's an abstract, that is, or if it's a developmental paper. So you can do that, because if I look at my papers from my first year, sometimes I read them, I'm like, oh my gosh, who wrote that? But now, because I've learnt so much, I'm able to articulate myself a bit better. So SCISpace is the place to go. And finally, in terms of the AI writing, like I said, it is a powerful tool that is needed and necessary, especially with your PhD. It's quite busy, or your master's, and you're looking for a job. It's a good place to be. So if you have any questions, I've come to the end of my spiel. Feel free to send them through, ask your questions, and I will respond back to you. But hopefully you'll be able to sign up to SciSpace. We'll send you a discount code. So you'll put Ph.D. Hard Talk on there, be able to get a discount in terms of your subscription. It will help you if you've plagiarized and you want to unplagiarize. It is the place to be, essentially, in terms of service. So yeah, that's that. Any questions? Anything to add? And thank you very much again, for listening. So, being within the HR industry, how would you suggest using SciSpace to improve employability skills when applying for jobs? So, again, if you are able to go into the journals that are there, let's say you want to go into engineering, you'll be able to find the key words for the job that you want to apply for. So therefore, you'll be able to list that on your CV. Like I said, they use a lot of softwares nowadays, and that will help you to get the keywords to be picked up. And then hopefully you'll be able to make it into the door. The rest is up to you as a person in terms of speaking, expressing yourself, and also going through that point, evidence explained, which is the problem, solution, and the next steps, essentially. Thank you, James, for your feedback. Apologies again in terms of the audio initially, but yeah, hopefully I've answered the question. Any more questions? So, Lily, with companies using AI technology to screen candidates for the interviews process, do you think there are any cons with using AI technology in such processes for employers? Yes, they are, because that human touch is needed. And some people are bad at writing their CVs. And also, if you've said these are the skills that we need for a JD, sometimes knowing what I've dealt with in the past in terms of recruitment, you look at a CV and you think, actually, they'll be good for another job. So you lose out on candidates, because let's say you're focusing on, say, an admin person, and that person has skills in terms of payroll, and you're also looking for a payroll candidate, but you haven't had the sign off in terms of the budget. But you know that you need that person, you'll be recruiting shortly. So you will lose that CV because you're only focusing on what the AI technology has given you. So it can be a loss in that way. So there are pros and cons, but it's all subjective, because sometimes you advertise a job, but you've already got somebody that you think you want to recruit. So you're just doing it for legal reasons, essentially, but you'll get that person into that position. Hopefully that answers your question, Lily. Any more questions? Right. Oh, okay. We have one. Did you have a mentor from a different sector? And if so, how did it personally help you in the HR industry? So yes, I had a mentor. He was in IT, and it helped me because he was also into property development, and he explained what was needed in order for you to survive within the IT industry to me. And because he was male and I'm female, as you can tell, he expressed his challenges. So I was able to learn, how he solved those challenges in terms of the people in the workplace, mainly work politics, is what he spoke to me about. And also, number two, he spoke to me about investment, to say, your salary, do you just get it and it's gone, or do you have a little bit of money left, in order for you to then reinvest it? Are you just going to get your McDonald's and you're done? Is that the situ? What are you doing? So he would challenge my way of thinking. And because he had a startup in Nigeria, and I was like, why would you have a startup in Nigeria? Like, that doesn't make sense. You live in the UK. Why would you do that? And he said, there's cheap labor there in terms of currency. So therefore, if I've got clients in the UK and the work is being done there, I have a bit of profit. So that got me thinking to say, you can be global. You don't have to necessarily think of just, the UK in terms of where you are. You can take chances, risks. Sometimes you might lose the money, sometimes you might not. And it helped me in the workplace because when we had issues, let's say if we're going through redundancies, I was able to go to other factories or other businesses and say, we're going to go through redundancies. We're going to essentially, this is the estimated figure, let's say 400 people. Are you looking for staff? You can bring them in, have inductions. I've already done this work, we'll help them with their CV writing. Some of them, they've never been to interview because they started when the business started in the 19 somethings or whatever, just as an example. And they were able to then get a job. So I was able to think strategically. I think that's the one key skill that he taught me, to be very strategic, because that keeps you in a job. If you have something that most people don't have, you stay in a job, essentially. So hopefully that answers your question. Methodic, United Kingdom. You may come back with the response if it didn't. And then I have Lungani. Great presentation, Norma. I'm just curious about your African roots. I am South African international student in Taiwan. Do I know Taiwanese? No, I don't. I was going to try and say something. Dumelang, Lingani, Hlongo, Njani. So hopefully that answers your question. So from a HR perspective, what qualities and characteristics do employers look for in employee during the hiring process? So I think the main thing is you have to be likable. People have to like you, because that's the test, isn't it? Is to say, do we like this person or do we not? Do we think this person's going to fit into the team or not? Is this person going to clash? So when they ask you questions, the way you speak, if you're not smiling, and sometimes people's voices, if you don't know how to control your voice and your voice is just draining, I don't think you'll get the job, because they'll be like, oh my gosh, she is jarring, like just draining. Why are you speaking like it's sleeping? Work on your voice. Keep everybody awake. Maybe I'm boring you. I don't know. You can share feedback. If I speak like I'm falling asleep. You have to have a bit of room, in you, essentially, because people buy into the person as much as they buy into your CV. That's why I said it's really important that you know how to articulate yourself. You practice in the mirror. You point, evidence, explain. You do a bit of acting. If that gets you in, you maintain the acting. I know it'd be difficult, but you maintain it, because then people have bought into that dream. They want to, stick to that dream, essentially. So I don't know if that answers the question in terms of qualities, but point, evidence, explain, be a good communicator, listen to the question, answer the question. If you don't know how to answer the question, like I said, pick up your drink, drink it and, have a think and ask them to rephrase the question until you can get your thoughts in the right order for you to answer the question, if that makes sense. But yeah, you may share EM if that wasn't clear. So methodic, United Kingdom, thank you. This was really helpful. I'm glad it was helpful. I wanted to ask with PhD Hard Talk, what made you begin this community and what is your vision for the channel? So I started PhD Hard Talk because I have to pass my PhD, being strategic. I think I've shared that. So the question that they ask is, how are you going to disseminate your work? So this is the quickest way. I've told you I'm looking at women's career development, dissemination. I'm collecting my data, dissemination. So that's why I started this YouTube channel, because it's quicker for me to get my work out there and people can ask me questions and I can literally see my blind spots while you're asking me questions. And if I haven't thought of something, or maybe if your feedback challenges what I think is right, then I'm able to go back again and work on it to fix it, essentially. So that's why I started PhD Hard Talk. But it wasn't just about me, because I'd like to think I'm not that selfish. I thought of other PhD students as well. How do they disseminate their work? We publish, we go to conferences, but we're only speaking to people who are in the scientific community. But it's quicker to speak this way because anybody can watch, a YouTube channel video, and then it goes out and people can contact you. So if you're having your progression review, you're able to say, actually, I've had few people from the video that I done on PhD Hard Talk contact me, so I am disseminating my work, and that will help you pass your progression review or your mini viva, dependent on the terminology that your university uses. And it's helped me essentially, and I think I've had feedback from previous guests as well who've said the same thing, or who've come on before the actual viva and said, Noma, ask me some questions so I can be prepared for my viva and I can answer the questions with confidence because I've done it already, and I'll share it with my supervisor. They will give me pinpointers as well in terms of how I can improve and do better. So I've had that feedback as well. Hopefully that answers your question, methodic United Kingdom. Any more questions, or is that it for the day? Are we calling it a day? So if there isn't any more questions, just put a thumbs up and we'll call it a day. But if there are any more questions, feel free again to send them through, because I think I've been talking for nearly an hour now. So in terms of SCISpace then, if I've seen a few people, you're doing your PhD, it is a really good platform to use, especially if you want to write for publication. You can just search up a topic, all the papers will pop up with that topic. Then you'll be able to go through them to screen the paperwork. And once you've screened all the journals on there, you'll be able to choose which ones you want to use, and you'll be able to go on Web of Science and look at the citations in terms of how many people have cited the papers, or you can go on Google Scholar, you can do that, and then you'll be able to work through and hopefully write your paper. Oh my gosh, my auntie's just said hi. Sorry. Hi, auntie. Oh, I'm new to this. I'll work on my poker face. And so in terms of that, so you can work on that. SCISpace is a place to be. So if you use the PhD Hard Talk 20, you'll be able to get 20% monthly discount. So please use that code if you're in university. I know my funds are limited as well, so you may use that. and that should be able to help you to get your papers, download your papers, work on your thesis, and write for publication. Remember, in order for you to stay in academia, you have to publish in the good journals. So if you're going to write a systematic review, make sure you're reading the papers, and SCISpace has that. You can paraphrase, you can turn a PDF to speak to you if you prefer audio. If you don't like reading, it is the place to be. And essentially that should be able to help you to get your work out there. Everybody in academia, maybe not everybody, but I can speak for myself, we want to be cited. That's why we do what we do. So SCISpace, subscribe, and follow Ph.D. Hard Talk on socials. So the link has been shared, I believe, in the chat, so you can subscribe or register on SCISpace. Any more questions? No, I think that's it for today. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you think I can do better in terms of next time, please feel free to share your feedback and I will work on that. And if you have any more questions relating to being employable, feel free again to get in contact. I might not respond then because I have a conference, but I will try and respond to you when I have a moment. And thank you so much, Lungani.